Small disclaimer before this video starts. This is all a complete estimation that may be ridiculously incorrect, but we're going to do it anyway just for fun. Hope you enjoy. Well, I'm finally doing it. I'm finally making a video that isn't an analysis. Kinda. Anyways, what's up everyone? A few weeks ago, I was brainstorming some new video ideas. Something different, or entertaining even. While scrolling through the comments of an older video, I saw something I remember reading before. This comment from Dennis shined light on the fact that the Splatoon section of the Nintendo Switch app compares Splatoon's in-game point values to real-life structures and landmarks. So, Dennis suggested that it may be possible to find out the size of Splatoon itself. And in this video, we are going to do exactly that. Our overall goal for this video is to find the estimated length and width of Inkopolis Square, from front to back and as closely as we can in real-life measuring units. There are many obstacles that we need to overcome and steps to take in order to reach our goal, so let's get started. Step 1. Compare ink coverage to point values with different weapons. To explain, this entire video will not work unless the points are a concrete measurement on maps themselves. This is an issue I needed to be sure of to move on, as I thought there was a possibility weapons like chargers may have a sort of point multiplier on them. To test this, I used multiple weapons on Inkblot Art Academy in this small area right below the spawn. I quickly found out it takes 110 points to ink this area. I tested chargers, rollers, and even average shooters. This test was solid enough proof that point values were concrete and the same for every weapon, which means points will be an accurate measuring system, so now we can move on. Step 2. Find out run speed in Inkopolis Square and match that in-game. This step introduces how we will be measuring the square in run speed time, which also introduces a problem. In order for this measurement method to be at all accurate, the run speed in-game has to match the run speed in Inkopolis. Going to find this out was a tough one. I thought if the field of view remains the same in-game and in the square, then we can just point the camera straight down with stick controls to ensure it doesn't move, and measure the amount of time objects appear and disappear on the screen. So I took a screenshot with the camera facing all the way down in the square, and then I did the same in-game. After this, I lowered the transparency of one of the images, and now we can see both at the same time, and confirm that the field of view is actually equal in-game and in the square. Knowing this information, we can now move on to the speed test. In the square, I used the white painted line on the ground. Watch the arrows on screen to see what I mean. After running this speed test, the start of this white line entered and left the frame in 1 second and 59 frames. So now I went to the shooting range to see how we can match the Inkopolis run speed time we got off 1 second 59 frames. For this test, I was using the E-liter using 0 run speed. At this point, we were running at the slowest normal run speed, and luckily for us, the test was only 1 to 3 frames off. Our time here was 1 second and 57 frames. This is slightly different, possibly because of the camera being angled ever so slightly, but either way, this is technically the closest we can get to simulating the Inkopolis Square run speed in-game. Step 3. Measuring Inkopolis using run speed time. This next step is easy, yet one of the biggest parts in reaching our goal. Here is where we measure Inkopolis entirely, so it's important to get the numbers as precise as possible. Please note, this video is taking into account all of Inkopolis Square, including the space being taken up by buildings, and roughly estimating the slight differences in the corners. So, I decided the best place to start for the length would be at the salmon run cage, and go all the way to the back of the square. For the width, I just ran from one side to another near the bottom, where there are no buildings in the way, while also avoiding obstacles. Here's a super rough sketch I threw together in Microsoft Paint that shows roughly where we will be measuring. Anyway, as you can see here, the length measured to be 13 seconds and 50 frames. And after multiple takes, I then lined up the footage of the width and determined that 7 seconds and 47 frames is the closest that we can get. And there we have it. 7 seconds and 47 frames is our width, while 13 seconds and 50 frames is our length. Step 4. Take this runtime in-game and find the right places to ink on a map. This is where we're going to run into a lot of issues. The first being that there is obviously no open measurable space in the game as big as Inkopolis Square. So what we are going to have to do is split the length in half, and just multiply our results later by 2. Think of all these areas as one flat surface, since essentially we are trying to calculate the amount of points it takes to ink a square. First, I ran across the flat ground area on Inkblot and recorded it. After that, I added a timer on the bottom, starting exactly when the inkling passes this point here, since the little ramp won't be there during the other match, where we will be in turf war mode as I ran this test in Rainmaker for accuracy reasons. I took our length of 13 seconds and 50 frames and divided that number by 2, so now we have 6 seconds and 55 frames. The next thing to do is see which time the 6 seconds and 55 frames or the width is closest to a notable place on the map. This sounds confusing, but take a look here to see what I mean.
If we end with the width of 7 seconds and 47 frames, the timer shows we would have to stop inking at this awkward spot on the map. If we use the length divided by 2 here, we just have to ink slightly past where the decline starts. So we're going to use the length in this spot of the 6 seconds and 55 frames just because it's a lot easier. Now that we know how long of an area we are inking, we have to now find out the width. What I did at first was run across this bottom part of the map in Rainmaker. However, as you can see, the time only lines up to 6 seconds and 13 frames when we are trying to make it match the width. This means that we are going to have to back up a bit and improvise. So let's go up top closer to the spawn and run for a bit longer. To get rid of the lag from falling, I cut the footage frame perfectly with the previous footage so that the inkling speed remains precise for a more accurate measurement. Now we can see that if the timer begins here, the inkling will hit the wall at the exact same time measurement as the width. Okay, so now let's take a quick recap since that was a lot of information. For the length, we split the time in two. For the inking test, we will begin inking here at this line and then stop inking all the way over here, slightly past this line. And now for the width, we will ink everywhere within that length barrier from this line here on the map and stop all the way at the wall on the other side. Step 5. Ink the determined area and calculate the points. For the execution of this step, I had to get a friend to help ink the area, as I would not have enough time to do so myself in Turf War. So let's get started. After the match, me and my teammate will add our points together and double that amount, because remember, we are doubling this amount since we split the length by 2. Now as you can see here on screen, I have to be very careful when painting the edges of the whole square because it has to fit the dimensions we discussed earlier as closely as possible. And after many different tries, I was satisfied with how we did. Keep in mind the results on screen shows areas like here and here that appear to be inked extra. This is done on purpose to compensate areas that could not be inked, like this dark gray box thing over here. But still, as you can see in the final test, we did a pretty good job at inking a near perfect representation of half of Inkopolis Square. I inked a total of 164 points, with my teammate inking 275. Together that is 439 points inked. Now we multiply this by 2 for a grand total of 878 points. So in theory, this is how many points it would take to ink all of Inkopolis Square. Step 6. Using SplatNet to relate in-game points to real-world measurements. SplatNet says Central Park is 1,031,000 points. We are going to use this landmark as an example since it's literally a flat rectangle. Now the actual size of Central Park in real life is stated in the app when you save the image of completing the challenge. As shown here in the image, the size of Central Park is 3.4 kilometers squared, and this is what we need to go to the next step. Step 7. Create a ratio with these numbers and the results from earlier. In order to create a ratio, we have to put the numbers of the same unit on the same side of the equation. So, the ratio would be the amount of points we counted over the amount of points of Central Park, equals our variable x and the real size of Central Park. After filling in those numbers and solving for x, we have our answer, and there we have it. This is the size of Inkopolis Square in real kilometers squared. However, we are not stopping here. Let's multiply this result by 1 million to convert this to square meters. After this, we can see that Inkopolis Square is roughly 2,895 meters squared. We can then see that Inkopolis Square is roughly 31,166 feet squared, which is just over half the size of a professional football field. Let's dive even deeper into what we started and find the actual length and width. Step 8, the final step. Create multiple equations and plug in variables to find the length and width. To avoid wasting everyone's time, I won't go into complete detail, but I will keep all the math on screen for those who are interested. To find our length and width in feet, we're going to have to go look at a very basic formula. Length times width equals area, but what we are going to do is create a new equation that is equal to the length variable. If we take the length, we can then set it equal to width times x, because x could equal anything. X would be equal to length over width. If length times width equals area, and length equals width x, then we can conclude that width times x times width also equals the area. Now we can backtrack to where we said x equals length divided by width. This length or width would be the data that we already have in seconds, so essentially we have w times our ratio times w equals our area in square feet. Now we just solve this equation. The width is about equal to 132 feet with a bunch of decimals. Now we just plug this into the area equation. Again, there we go, we are left with a result of 235.337 feet. We have finally reached our goal. Inkopolis Square, in theory, is approximately 132 feet wide and 235 feet long. I gotta say, they seem pretty realistic. I'm actually very surprised that we were even able to get this far because of all the issues that we ran into, but we finally made it. Thank you so much to everyone who actually stayed through to watch this entire video. I had no idea it was going to be this long, but I left it for once, since it's my first time really uploading a video for entertainment in a really long time. I may end up using these results in other videos coming up soon, so be sure to stick around. And hey, I mean, even though our calculations could be way off, I had a lot of fun getting there, and I hope everybody else did too. Peace.